Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Islamic Defense Podcast. So a few days ago I watched a video by Colin, or aka Islam Critic, and in this video he tried to claim that apparently Jesus spoke Greek. Now the reason he's making this claim is because you know that the Bibles are actually written in Greek, but there's plenty of evidence that shows that Jesus most likely spoke Aramaic, and that's a problem for him. So he needs to defend his position, and this is a point that a lot of Muslims often brings up. So in his attempt to defend the Bible, he makes the claim that Jesus, possibly spoke Greek. So let's take a look and see what his argument is, and then I'll make my response.
Welcome back, everyone. As the Muslim polemic goes, Jesus spoke Aramaic, but the Gospels were written in Greek. In this video, I'd like to present 10 brief but relevant considerations in response. First, the statement Jesus spoke Aramaic, but the Gospels were written in Greek is misleading, since it is intended to mean that Jesus did not speak Greek also. However, many scholars believe that Jesus had proficiency in 3 languages: Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. If you want a sampling of scholars who emphasize that Jesus may have spoken Greek, pause this video, look up the resources on your screen, and read to your heart's content. In particular, Stanley Porter has argued that Matthew's version of the Sermon on the Mount was delivered in Greek. Thus, the assumption that the polemic entails, namely that Jesus did not speak Greek, needs to be proven and not simply assumed.
Okay, so here he's committing the logical fallacy known as appeal to authority. Now, appeal to authority fallacy is a tricky logical fallacy. A lot of people don't understand why this fallacy is actually a fallacy. So let me try to boil this down as to why this is actually a logical fallacy. For example, let's say I'm making an argument, and here what Colin does is that he tries to make the argument that because certain Christian scholars have written books and argued that Jesus could have spoken Greek also, it means that claim that Jesus spoke Aramaic is something that we have to prove. And the reason this is a fallacy is because he is not actually showing the arguments that are being made by these so-called authorities. Instead, he's simply using their name and their books and saying that, oh, this authority says this, therefore it's proven that Jesus spoke Greek. No. That's not how logic works. Okay, you can just quote some random scholar and say that therefore it's proven. It doesn't work like that. So you see, when it comes to argumentation, or when it comes to logic or philosophy, you not only have to quote the scholar, you actually have to quote the argument that is made by the scholar and show why this is the case. And then we will evaluate whether that argument is acceptable or not. Now, obviously not everyone, obviously there are exceptions to this. For example, when it comes to scientific findings, like if a scientist is writing a scientific research paper and he is writing about his own finding, in that case, of course, you can cite him. But if you're like saying things like a broader theory or something more that's not clear cut, like for example, in this instant, there is a disagreement among different scholars. Now, some scholars said Jesus did only speak Aramaic, and some scholars said no, he might have also spoke Greek. So it's not clear cut. So you can't just quote a scholar without giving a reason why that scholar believes this to be the case. This is why this is a logical fallacy. Another logical fallacy he's committing is known as the shifting the burden of proof fallacy. You see, it is pretty commonly known that scholars believe that Jesus spoke Aramaic. As a matter of fact, there is an article on, I believe on history.com, where they literally quote the Pope himself saying that Jesus spoke Aramaic. Also, the Bible itself says that Jesus spoke Aramaic. For example, Acts 26:14, as quoted by his commenter, says the following: "We all fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me in Aramaic, 'Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?' it is hard for you to kick against the goats. So here, Jesus himself supposedly was speaking to Saul or Paul, and he was saying in Aramaic that why is he persecuting the Christians? Either way, the point is there is a strong opinion of the scholars that is backed up by evidence that shows that Jesus most likely spoke Aramaic. However, we have no evidence, literally no evidence that shows that Jesus spoke Greek. There's literally none whatsoever. This is why he's committing the logical fallacy known as shifting the burden of proof fallacy, because the burden of proof is actually on him because he's the one making the claim. So far, he has not justified that claim. But regardless, let's see what else he says.
Proficiency in multiple languages would not have been unusual for Jews in Jesus' day. Muslims intentionally overlook this fact. This leads us to our second observation. Greek and Semitic speakers in Jesus' milieu were not opposed, as Muslims would have us believe. Scholars like Stanley Porter speak of the complex multilingualism of the Eastern Roman Empire, noting that Jews, and especially Jewish teachers, would have been functionally bilingual and proficient in Greek. Martin Hingel estimated that 10 to 20% of resident Jews in Jerusalem spoke Greek as their vernacular or mother tongue.
Okay, now he's again bringing this guy called Stanley Porter, I believe his name is. And I've actually read this book, not all of it, but the references that he gives, I actually read it. And this guy's justification for why Jesus supposedly spoke Greek is so bad that let me just mention this to you, okay? So basically, the way he justified this is by using 3 different Bible verses. Matthew 4, verse 23 to 25, where it says, "And he went through all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every diseases and every affliction among the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria, and they brought him all the sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, those having seizures and paralytics, and he healed them. And great crowds followed him from Galilee and the Decapolis, and from Jerusalem and Judea, and from beyond of Jordan." So basically, here in 25, it mentions a few places: Galilee, Decapolis, Jerusalem, and Judea, and from beyond of Jordan. Another verse that he mentions is Luke 6, 17 to 49. Where it says the same thing, "And he went with them and stood on a level place. A large cloud of his disciples was there, and a great number of people from all over Judea, from Jerusalem, and from coastal regions around Tyre and Sidon followed him." Another one, it says that crowd followed Jesus. Jesus withdrew with his disciples to take the crowd, and a large crowd from Galilee followed. When they heard all he was doing, many people came from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, and the region across the Jordan, and around Tyre and Sidon. So basically what he does is that he takes all these different locations that is mentioned in these 3 different Bible verses, and he tries to mix them and tries to make it seem like, in some of these places, some Jewish people knew how to speak Greek. Therefore, it must mean that Jesus must have spoke Greek. That's his logic. Now, obviously, this is a non sequitur fallacy. Just because some people from those regions spoke Greek does not mean that Jesus also spoke Greek. Like, for example, I live in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, there are native peoples that live here. By native means that they lived before we arrived. Basically, meaning Indo-Aryans arrived in this region. So the native people here actually speaks a different language, and they have their own language. Now, imagine if someone says that, Islamic defense, he's giving a lecture, and in his lecture there were some native people from the Bengal region that attended his lectures. And since those native people spoke their own language, therefore Islamic defense must also speak their language as well. You see the problem? It makes no sense. Just because some of his followers may have spoken Greek does not mean that he also spoke Greek. It's a non sequitur. And he establishes his whole thesis based on this logical fallacy. And it makes no sense. Regardless, let's see what else he says.
Number 3, Greek inscriptions. In Palestine, the triumphal progress of Greek makes an impressive showing in inscriptions. From the 3rd century BC, we find almost exclusively Greek inscriptions in Palestine. Do you think that Jews made some of those inscriptions? I'll go with yes. It's just too bad that Muslims weren't there to tell those Jews that their inscriptions were in the wrong language.
Again, strawman argument. Like, no one is saying that people back then, there weren't people who couldn't speak Greek. No one is saying that. Tries to make it seem like that we are saying that no one could have spoken Greek. No one is saying that. Sure, it's possible that educated high-class people, such as the Jews or the rabbis back then, who used to study a lot, could have possibly spoken Greek. But that has nothing to do with Jesus. There is no evidence that shows that Jesus spoke Greek. Okay? Get this through a thick skull.
Fourth, we find lots of Jews with Greek names in the ancient world. A couple of relevant examples would be Jesus' disciples, like Philip and Andrew, to name a few. Fifth, the Essenes, who had a very critical attitude toward the Greek world, could not get by without the Greek language, as is shown by the Greek papyrus fragments found in Qumran, which include fragments of the Septuagint.
Oh my god, this is gonna be the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Wallahi, this is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. So his literal argument is that, Jesus spoke Greek because there are some people back then who had Greek names. Imagine this, right? I have an Arabic name. I have the name Muhammad in my name, okay? That must mean that I speak Arabic, right? It's this level of logic that these Christian apologetics are coming up with. It makes no sense. Just because people have Greek names does not mean that Jesus spoke Greek. There's literally no connection there. It's a non sequitur. Like, do you know how many people in the world is named Muhammad or has Arabic names? Do they all speak Arabic? No. Just because some people have Arabic names or Latin names or whatever does not mean they actually speak those language. Okay? So again, this is just so stupid. Regardless, let's see what else it says.
Number 6, the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek, again showing the prominence of the language. I suppose Muslims would have had it translated into Aramaic?
This guy's logic is so funny. I can't. Okay, so you know what? The Quran is translated into English. That must mean, Prophet Muhammad must have spoken English. That is the level of logic this guy is operating with. Wallahi, again, it's a non sequitur, and honestly, sometimes Christian apologetics honestly hurt my brains. This is so bad. Again, like I said, this is like me saying that Prophet Muhammad spoke English because the Quran is translated into English. Regardless, let's see what else it says.
Number 7, along with the Septuagint, is the letter of Aristeas. Whatever you think of its historicity, it does take for granted, around 140 BC, that the 72 translators who came from Palestine had all had a solid Greek education. This, again, is a reminder of the prominence of the Greek language.
There are translators in my country that can translate Sanskrit, which is probably one of the oldest language that exists. Does that now mean that I speak Sanskrit? Oh my god. It's a non sequitur again. Just because there are translators back then who might have spoken Greek doesn't mean that Jesus also spoke Greek. This has nothing to do with Jesus. Oh my god. I can't. Anyway, let's continue. Let's see what else it says.
Number 8, Maccabees. Moreover, the books of Maccabees clearly show that not only the members of the Hellenistic party, but also many supporters of Judas and his brothers had a command of Greek. This is the only way in which the embassies to Rome and Sparta and the tedious negotiations with the Syrian rulers are conceivable. There was no stopping the penetration of the Greek language even in Jewish Palestine, and the young Jew who wanted to rise a stage above the mass of the simple people had to learn it.
Colin lives in the United States, right? I think that's where he lives. I'm not sure. In the US, the Native Americans speak their own native tongue, Aboriginal, I think. Aboriginals, is it? Anyway, so in America, there are Chinese people who speak Chinese. Does that now mean that Colin can now speak Chinese? No. There are people who came from Arabia who speak Arabic. Does that now mean that Colin now speaks Arabic? No, it doesn't. Same way, just because there were people that lived around that time who spoke Greek or might have spoken Greek, does not mean that Jesus spoke Greek. Okay, again, like most prevalent language at that time was Aramic, and the thing you need to understand is that Jesus was speaking to the layman, right, or the uneducated or the uninitiated. He was talking to the normal people. He was not talking to just rich educated people. He was mostly talking to people who were living around at that time. And from what I've seen, most historians agree that most like lay people, they spoke Aramaic. They didn't speak Greek. He keeps repeating this whole thing. Regardless, let's see what else it says.
Number 9. Ancient papyri. The final establishment and dissemination of the Koine was probably the most valuable and the most permanent fruit of Alexander's expedition. The way in which it dominated public and economic life in Egypt as virtually the only written language is shown by the Zeno correspondence. Among its approximately 2,000 items, there is not one single piece of writing in Aramaic. We have hardly 2 or 3 Aramaic or Hebrew writings from Jews in Egypt between 300 BC and 8300.
What does Egypt has to do with anything? Dude, have you lost your mind? What are you talking about? Wasn't okay. Where let's Google this. Where did Jesus live? Or supposedly lived? Yeah, Israel. Like he's arguing that like a completely different area where people Jesus didn't even live in that area, and he's saying because people around that area spoke that language, therefore it's possible that somehow Jesus must have spoken that language. It makes no sense. Like it's like me saying, people in my neighboring country, Thailand, they spoke Thai language. That must mean I also speak Thai language. That makes no sense. How can Christian apologetics be this stupid? It's like. Okay, I need to calm down. But this is so stupid. Like, do Christian apologetics really like? Do you guys not study logic? Like, this is embarrassing. Regardless, let's see what else he says.
Finally, Josephus initially wrote his Jewish War apparently in Aramaic, but then translated it into Greek. I, Josephus, have proposed to myself, for the sake of such as live under the government of the Romans, to translate those books into the Greek tongue, which I formerly composed in the language of our country and sent to the upper barbarians. For those under Roman rule, Greek was the best choice. The foregoing discussion shows that the statement Jesus spoke Aramaic, but the Gospels were written in Greek is in fact misleading.
It's not misleading. Most of the evidence and scholarly opinion suggests that Jesus most likely could have spoken Aramaic. But then again, even that is up in the air. Like there's no actual evidence that shows that Jesus spoke, which language Jesus spoke, whether it's Greek or Hebrew or Aramaic. It doesn't say anything. I mean, the Bible is literally silent on this matter as far as I'm concerned. If anything, the Bible says that he spoke Aramaic, but then again, there are contradictory reports on that. And just to show you how bad, that you can't even use the Bible for this. And why can't you use the Bible for this? Let me show you this. Okay, so let's use the verses that is used by Stanley Porter. For example, the first verse that we're going to look at is Matthew 4 and and it's 25, right? It says that a great crowd followed him from Galilee and the Decapolis, and from Jerusalem and Judea, and from beyond of Jordan. Then if we go a little forward, it says, seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain. When he sat down, his disciples came to him. So here it's saying that he went up on a mountain. Then in Luke 6:17, it says, and it's talking about the same incident, because Stanley Porter himself says that it's talking about the same incident. It says, he went down with them and stood on a level place. Wait a minute, I thought he went up in a mountain. Now it's saying that he went in a level place. Okay, then let's see what the third verse says. Jesus withdrew with his disciple to the lake, and a large crowd from Galilee followed. So now it's saying he was in a lake. So which one is it? Was Jesus in a mountain? Was he in a level place? Or was he in a lake? This is a complete contradiction. So which one is it? Was he in a lake or a level place or a mountain? Because it can't be all at the same time. like again, this is what I'm talking about. And by the way, if you look at the places that it mentions, it gives completely contradictory places. Like for example, in where it go? Okay, hold on. Don't do your butts. Okay, in the first verse, it says that people followed him from Galilee and Decapolis, Jerusalem and Judea. Then in Luke, it says that people follow him from Judea, Jerusalem and coastal regions and Tyre and Sidon. But it doesn't say anything about Decapolis. Decapolis is all of a sudden gone. And then it says that a large crowd gathered from Galilee, and many people came from Judea. Then it says people followed from Idumea. Where the hell did Idumea come from? Again, this is completely out of the blue. So as you can see, these three verses gives completely contradictory reports. And this is why the Bible is not reliable. You cannot use the Bible. Now, if it be one thing, if they all said the same thing, then we could maybe look past it. But not only does it not, for example, first of all, there's no chain of transmission. So we have no way to tell which is more reliable and which is not. Which of these reports are reliable and which of these are not. On top of that, not only does it have a chain of transmission, it doesn't even have a consensus where these reports do not even match with each other. They give contradictory reports. So this is why we have no way to use the Bible as a reference. And if we cannot use the Bible as a reference, then we can literally take anything about Isa or Jesus from the Bible or from a historical perspective. Which is why this whole Christian apologetic thing, where they try to make it seem like Jesus spoke Greek, is complete nonsense. There's no evidence for this. There's no concrete arguments for this, and this is them completely distorting history, and them being completely dishonest. Now, Colin's audience will not question this. They will buy anything he says. But the problem is we have to be critical. Okay, and everything he says is completely misrepresents logic. It misrepresents history. So again, we have to hold this up to scrutiny. And yeah, this was a complete waste of time. And this was extremely. I was really disappointed, because if this is the level that we have to deal with, where Christian apologetics is at, then I feel sad. I honestly feel sad. But regardless, I'm done with this video. Thank you guys for watching. Again, like, share, subscribe. If you really like the video, then please support me on Patreon. And yeah, with this I want to end the video. Thank you guys for watching. That's a Colin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.